With two big closers off the board now, is the next one that's going to sign someone that could be in the Rangers bullpen?
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers broadcast. I am Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 12 seasons, including all 7 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. You can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way we can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, on today's show, we're doing a little bit of a rumor roundup, talking about what's going down in the league so far, who's still on the board in free agency, who might be the next one to fall, and a recent signing by the Toronto Blue Jays that I think would have been pretty darn perfect on this Texas Rangers squad. Before we get into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Now, I intend to do this episode as a full-on rumor roundup. It will be a little bit more of a hodgepodge kind of an episode because there have not been as many rumors as I had hoped to round up at this point in the offseason. We are in December. We are less than a week away from the winter meetings. And as much as I love what Chris Young did in his first season as general manager of the Texas Rangers by winning the Rangers their first ever World Series championship, his front office doesn't necessarily have a lot of leaks. Actually, quite the opposite. It is a very, very tight-lipped front office. And so there usually are not a whole lot of rumorings, rumblings, any kind of hints of what the Rangers are actually doing until they go ahead and do the thing, which if I was a front office member, that's how I would run my ship. I would not let things just leak out. I mean, every leak to any reporter in all of baseball or in any sport whatsoever, they're all done intentionally. Not much is getting out accidentally. Usually it's to kind of influence the market one way or another. And some GMs just decide to be tight-lipped, which, you know what, good for them if it leads to success. But for me in my job, I would really appreciate a little bit looser lips on Chris Young and the Rangers front office in general. Just give me little bits, little juicy nuggets to latch onto. Whether they actually end up happening or not, just credible rumblings is what I ask for the offseason. There have not been all that many of them, but one big credible rumbling from a very credible Texas Rangers reporter, Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News, talking this offseason, saying that the Rangers will not go under $200 million in their payroll, which at the beginning of the offseason, heading into any point in the last couple of seasons, said, yeah, $200 million is the baseline. It is absolutely the baseline for where this team should be. But for some of the moves that they made early on in this winter, not only cutting bait with Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim and Josh Sborz and Jacob Webb, and just saying, sayonara, see you later. Y'all aren't worth the money. And then trading away Marcus Semien to lose about $5 million per year, to cut off $5 million per year on what the tax payroll is going to be, and getting in Brandon Nimmo, I guess $6 million if you throw in the amount of money that the Mets are paying Brandon Nimmo every single year. But it really seemed like a full-on catastrophe in terms of the payroll. It has been so much reporting all offseason about how the Rangers are so poor. Oh, these poor billionaires who will never tell you exactly how poor they are, just like the Yankees owner saying that it is unfair for fans to assume that the Yankees are profitable. Yeah, the New York Yankees, their owner is telling you, oh no, we're also poor. No, they're not. And they will never open the books to show you the actual financials, because if they did, that would let you know exactly how much obscene amounts of money these owners are making. So instead, they use these vague statements and cry poor of, oh no, we can't possibly afford to go and do all that. But the teams who do have open books, because they are publicly traded companies, in the Toronto Blue Jays, they are owned by a publicly traded company. So all of their books are actually open. So you can see how much of a profit that team is making. And same with the Atlanta Braves. They are also owned by a publicly traded company. So you can see their financial statements as well. And both of those teams are never the ones that are crying poor. They are making big old moves, including the Toronto Blue Jays signing the most expensive free agent so far this offseason. Probably not the most expensive for the entirety of the offseason. I bet Kyle Tucker gets more than the 7 years, $210 million that Dylan Cease got, which may seem like a lot. It's also a little bit less when you add in all the deferrals. It's more in the 180-ish, 85-ish million dollar range, with some of these deferrals bringing down that current present value. But Dylan Cease, the reason he got all that much money is because the things that he does well are things that are hard to replicate, and they're very, very valuable. He is young. He makes all of his starts, and he gets a lot of swings and misses. The rest of the stuff you can work on. But with the Rangers saying, yeah, we won't go under the $200 million payroll, that is at least preventing the doomsday scenario for the Rangers just completely blowing this thing up. Because you want to look at the teams that had a payroll below $200 million. That is 16 of the 30 teams in Major League Baseball. The Arizona Diamondbacks are the team just above the $200 million mark at $211 million. Teams below it: Seattle Mariners, Baltimore Orioles, Kansas City Royals, Detroit Tigers, Milwaukee Brewers, the Rockies, the Twins, the Reds. I mean, these are the bottom feeder teams that are in that kind of an area, and none of them are big market teams. Detroit is I think punching a little bit below its weight. It's a bigger city than it is spending like the market says it should be. But there are other teams in this above $200 million. I mean, the Diamondbacks were the 14th ranked payroll. 14th, and they were at $211 million. And so the Rangers might be right around $211 million, chopping off probably maybe $20 million, maybe as many as $30 million in this payroll. But at least it's good to know that there's no floor. But there are some other credible rumblings to chew on, most of them coming from Ken Rosenthal at this point, more about the market in general. But there have been quite a few big free agents that have come off the board, specifically of the closer variety. The Rangers, I don't think, were ever in on Devin Williams, but he signed a 3-year, $51 million deal with the New York Mets. Now, I don't know if this prevents the Mets from bringing back Edwin Diaz as well. Maybe Devin Williams as the setup guy, which, gosh, if you can have Devin Williams as your setup man and then throw Edwin Diaz out there in the ninth, that is a heck of an 8th, 9th inning combination. Probably, I'd say, the best in baseball at this point. There have also been a couple other big name closers that have gone off the market. Ryan Helsley signing a 2-year, $28 million deal with the Baltimore Orioles, who have said for a lot of this offseason they're looking for a 9th inning backhand guy, which makes me think that Felix Bautista may not be exactly their closer or all that ready or all that healthy next season. Phil Maton also coming off the board, signing a 2-year, $14.5 million deal. Now, he is not a closer, but he is someone who the Rangers very much wanted, and for $7.25 million for 2 years, it seems like the Rangers were just priced out, which is frustrating, but understandable given how much, or I guess how little they spent on their bullpen last season. It was basically $10 million or so for the vast majority of this bullpen. I mean, if not the entirety of this bullpen. I think the entire bullpen cost around maybe $15 million with all of the free agent signings that the Rangers made last year, which was, I believe, 4 total signings for $15 million. That is pretty good work. Actually, it might have been right around 10 now that I am thinking of it. But Raisel Iglesias also off the board, 1 year, $16 million. But there are still some good closers on the free agent market, mainly Edwin Diaz. I don't think the Rangers are going to be in on the Edwin Diaz sweepstakes, but according to Ken Rosenthal, the next domino to fall might just be Pete Fairbanks, the former Ranger reliever traded to Tampa Bay in one of the worst deals that the Rangers have made the last 10 years. Nick Solak providing a few months of joy and hope, and then a whole lot of nothing. And Pete Fairbanks being a really darn good closer for several years for the Tampa Bay Rays, including 2022, where he had a 1.11 ERA. He was absolutely outstanding that year, a 3.19 ERA for his career in the big leagues, including 8 games in Texas where he wasn't all that impressive. And then as soon as he gets the Rays, magically the Rays fix him. I don't think the Rangers are in on the Pete Fairbanks sweepstakes. He had a club option that the Rays declined. And the Rays know pitching very well, and they know their own pitching very, very well. And usually, as soon as they let a guy go, it's usually the right time, or they're just crying poor because the Rays are not a well-funded organization. And so anybody that gets even marginally expensive has to walk right out that door. And Pete Fairbanks, there's been a little bit of a decline the last couple of years. I think that the 2.83 ERA, the sub 3 ERA, is a little bit misleading from what he did last year. Did still have 27 saves, and so if you really value a guy with that ninth and experience, which I think the Rangers probably will this offseason, given what happened last year with their closer situation, maybe Pete Fairbanks is an option. I think he is probably going to be the next to sign him. The Blue Jays are also in on the Pete Fairbanks sweepstakes, according to Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic. I think that this could be a little bit of a bidding war for Pete Fairbanks, which would probably clock the Rangers out of that kind of a deal. There's also been a few other teams that are in on him. I mean, the Blue Jays are looking to do a whole lot. Devin Williams and Edwin Diaz and Robert Suarez are still on the market. So, I mean, the top end guys at closer are still available. And so I think that's why Pete Fairbanks could be the next domino to fall. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about why Brandon Nimmo waiving his no trade clause is such a good sign for this Texas Rangers squad, and about a Korean free agent that could have been perfect for the Rangers if he didn't just sign with Toronto. Talk about all that and more right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what making live bets with betting with FanDuel is so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Let's look at some of the odds for the NHL Stanley Cup this year. Right now, the favorites to win the whole dang thing, the Colorado Avalanche at plus 390, Carolina Hurricanes next favorite at plus 750, Stars all the way down there at plus 1,300. I guess they really didn't love that loss they had last night in overtime to the New York Rangers. They are behind the Edmonton Oilers. The Stars have plus 1,300 odds to win the Stanley Cup this year. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Shout out to the everydayers making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, I'll be looking more at some of these international free agents from the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization, and Nippon Professional Baseball, the Japanese Professional Baseball League, because there are some interesting guys on there, and including one that I'll talk about a little bit later today, because he is no longer available. But I want to focus in on Brandon Nimmo waiving his no trade clause. There is a couple articles written by the Dallas Morning News quoting Brandon Nimmo of what convinced him to sign, or I guess agreed to waive his no trade clause to be a part of the Texas Rangers organization. And part of it was a phone call with his former teammate, Jacob deGrom, saying, hey, is this team really about winning? Is this team actually going to continue to go at least all in-ish, at least in enough, and not just completely rebuild? Because trading away a pillar like Marcus Semien, he was told what the deal would be. It'd be him for Marcus Semien. And he said, okay, well, if you're, as any player should, they'd be a little bit cautious, a little bit taken aback by saying, oh, you're going to trade one of the guys who is the pillar in you winning the World Series. 2 years ago, he was a third place MVP finisher. He is your captain. You're really going to trade away that guy? Are you actually going to commit to winning? After that, what is the deal with that? So obviously he had some stipulations, but it basically came down to the framework of the deal was done. He said, am I the only thing standing in the way of this deal getting done? I don't want to do that. But part of the reason he was so moved to waive his no trade clause because the Rangers were so aggressive in pursuing him. They wanted him so badly. They loved the qualities that he brought, the quality of his at-bats, which is something the Rangers were lacking in offensively. Not just the actual results in their at-bats last year were bad, but the quality of those at-bats, the working counts, the doing anything productive offensively. That was not happening with the Texas Rangers in 2025. And Brandon Nimmo provides that. He very much provides that. The quality of his at-bats has been one of the things that has been touted about him, his on-base ability, his ability to see pitches, his ability to hit lefty on lefty pretty darn well. Not incredibly well. He's not going to be, one of the best left-handed. He's one of the better left-on-left guys because hitting left-handed pitching as a left-handed hitter is so difficult because you get so few reps at it, and because the shape of left-handed pitches is so primed to just destroy left-handed hitters. And again, you don't get that many reps. You don't get to see it that much. You don't have as much experience. That's part of why Evan Carter has struggled so much, is because he hasn't seen a whole lot of quality lefties. And so if you don't see a whole lot of quality lefties, you don't get those reps. You don't get the at-bats. You don't get the experience to know how to better handle those good left-handed pitchers. But Brandon Nimmo will provide that. He will be a platoon neutral-ish enough at bat, which will be very, very helpful for this Rangers squad. And the promises that Chris Young made to still contend, to not just tear this thing down. He made a lot of promises to Brandon Nimmo. And if he's waiving his no trade clause, a guy who has been in that Mets organization for so darn long, it says not only that the Rangers are committed to winning, but also that the Mets are kind of a mess. There's been a lot of reporting about the New York Mets and the issues in their clubhouse, the apparent beef between Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. Francisco Lindor does not think that Juan Soto puts in enough effort defensively. There's been some rifts in the clubhouse. There's just been all kinds of messy drama with the New York Mets this past year, and just their historic collapse at the end of this season. I mean, the Rangers, they were right in there trying to get to the postseason, but they were not holding down a postseason spot for months and months on end, and then just a slow train wreck of a collapse that nobody could do anything about, including getting, I believe, swept by the Marlins in the last weekend of the season. I mean, the Mets were just in such a tailspin free fall for basically the entire second half of the season after being one of the better teams in baseball for the first 2 months. I mean, the Rangers had a depressing fall off late in the season to miss the postseason, but the Mets, oh my goodness, it was worse. And it wasn't just Mets fans being catastrophic and, apocalyptic with their fandom, as Mets fans are known to do. This was a legitimately embarrassing train wreck of a season for the New York Mets. And Brandon Nimmo is a New York Mets lifer. That's why this trade was so surprising on not just the Rangers front, but according to Mets fans as well. They were surprised to see Brandon Nimmo, a guy who was possibly going to be captain this year, a guy whose number was possibly going to be retired, a guy who is just beloved by fans, broadcasters, reporters in the clubhouse. Everybody around the Mets loved Brandon Nimmo. He was the New York Mets. He was drafted by the New York Mets. He has never been in another professional baseball organization besides the New York Mets until he waived his no trade clause and became a member of the Texas Rangers. It is a twofold thing of both the Rangers being committed to winning and also the Mets being a little bit of a mess, because even with a little bit of the messy drama happening in the background of the New York Mets, there is still at least that financial component that they do have Steve Cohen as their owner. And so the financial issues, self-inflicted, real or not, they're still rearing their head in how the Rangers are approaching this offseason, because they are not in on any of these top free agents. They are not going to be in on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. They're not going to be in on the Kyle Schwarber sweepstakes. They're not going to be in on really, I don't think any of the top closers of the Robert Suarez's of the world, of the Edwin Diaz's of the world. And the Mets can be, even with all of their financial issues, they still can be. And for Brandon Nimmo to decide, hey, with the unlimited money hack of having Steve Cohen behind the Mets, even with all of that and the infrastructure and the very talented players that the New York Mets have on their roster. Juan Soto is an incredible baseball player. Francisco Lindor is an incredible baseball player. And, they've got a lot of really young, talented pitchers that I think are going to be pretty good in Brandon Sproat and some of the other young guys, Jonah Tong as well. And one other guy whose name I'm forgetting, who is, Nolan McLean, who was also fantastic for them last year. They have a pretty high bar for what is success in New York. And with Brandon Nimmo seeing all of that and making the decision that, yeah, I think I might have a better chance to win as a member of the Texas Rangers than the New York Mets, that's an encouraging sign for the Texas Rangers. There have not been a whole lot of those this offseason. It has mostly been wrought with just Ray Davis crying poor and the Rangers trying to shed payroll to the most insane degree. I mean, I'm still baffled by the decision to just cut bait with Jacob Webb instead of spending like $2 million on Jacob Webb, who was not the best reliever. He was not unbelievable, untouchable. He had, a sub 2 ERA in the second half. He was pretty darn good down the stretch there. Not a whole lot of strikeouts, not a whole lot of walks. He was a fine, middle reliever for $2 million. That is a perfectly reasonable cost. And the Rangers just said, no, thanks. No, thanks. So all of those signs are pointing to that kind of a teardown. But with this kind of a player, with this caliber of a player of Brandon Nimmo, who has been around some winning situations, he has been to a World Series with the New York Mets. He has been to an NLCS just in 2024. It was not that long ago. He was a key member of that New York Mets team that, outside of the Padres, they were the closest thing to giving the Dodgers some kind of an issue in the postseason. I mean, the Dodgers in 2024 didn't really have that much of an issue. It was a little close in the NLDS against those Padres, but with that injury to Joe Musgrove, it kind of threw things off. But the Mets were a really, really darn good team, and down the stretch in 2024, they were the best team in baseball, basically from the Grimace incident on. They were an incredible team. And to get this kind of a guy to buy in to this Rangers system, I see why Chris Young has been such an effective GM, why he was a big part, I think, of the Rangers signing both Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. Even though he wasn't in charge of the team at that point, I think that Chris Young is very, very good at selling players on his vision. And you know what? He's so good at convincing those players, he might have just convinced me too. Shout out to everyone making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Friday's show, I will be previewing the winter meetings, what the Rangers need to get done, what they might get done, what all needs to go into next week's winter meetings on Friday's episode of Locked On Rangers. Now, there is one free agent that has signed that really bummed me out that he is not a member of the Texas Rangers. I think this would have been such a perfect fit. That is Cody Ponce, a name that you might not know. You probably don't know unless you are really big into the Korean baseball organization. You probably do not know the name Cody Ponce, who has been a big leaguer, a former second-round pick by the Milwaukee Brewers back in 2015 out of Cal State Polytechnic University, Pomona. That is a whole mouthful. Spent 2 seasons in the big leagues, one of them with the Brewers, actually both of them with the Pittsburgh Pirates, set a 3.18 ERA in 5 games in 2020, and then a ERA north of 7 in 15 games in 2021. With the Pirates, he ended up going to Japan for a couple of seasons in 2022 and in 2023, and also in 2024, and was just kind of fine. He was fine in Japan. He was not anywhere particularly great. But in Korea last year, as a 31-year-old, he was outstanding. He was outstanding. He added 2 ticks of velocity on his fastball. Instead of averaging around 93, he was averaging 95. He's 6'6", so he's got a really, really great release point. He does not walk guys. He does not beat himself with home runs. And he struck out just about everybody last year, including setting a KBO record, 18 strikeouts in a game. He pitched in 180 2/3 innings last year, 252 strikeouts for the season. And over in Japan and in Korea, the strikeout is much more of a kind of shameful thing. Players have much better 2-strike approaches over there. Strikeouts are just more of a big deal for hitters. So it is harder to strike out guys in Japan and in Korea than it is stateside. And so getting 12.6 Ks per 9 in 180 innings is really darn impressive. He was also 17-1. Not that win and loss record means all that much, but when you are 17-1 in 29 starts, you are doing something very, very right. In the KBO, he won the equivalent of the Cy Young Award, and he also won the MVP award. He was that good of a pitcher, a 1.89 ERA and over 250 strikeouts in around 180 innings. That is absolutely fantastic. He was coming over and seen as what might be a big bargain, but was projected to sign anywhere between a $30 and $40 million deal, not per year. That would be bonkers, but $30 million total over the course of 3 seasons is the deal that he signed with the Toronto Blue Jays, fortifying their rotation with 2 very good signings in Dylan Cease and also in Cody Ponce. $10 million per year for a guy who is maybe more of a mid-rotation starter. Now you may be thinking, Bryce, he just had a sub-2 ERA and 250 strikeouts and 180 innings. Well, that was in the KBO. It's a much lower level of competition than Major League Baseball. So think of it as kind of an equivalent between somewhere between AA and AAA in terms of the competition level, just the level of talent over there that has that level of success. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one, oh, he's going to come over to Major League Baseball and if he had 250 strikeouts there, that he's going to have 300 strikeouts here. That's not necessarily how all that works. But he added a new pitch as well, a kick changeup, which we've seen be very successful at times with both the Rangers, Matt Festa years ago, and then with Jack Leiter this year, and having that kind of a kick change that has been his primary secondary pitch. He also has a couple of different breaking balls that have had much better shape over the last year. He's still on the older side. He's going to be heading into his age 32 season, but getting him from age 32 to age 34 at $10 million a year for a guy who is maybe a mid-rotation to maybe he does come over and have success. Maybe he does end up being a kind of a number 2 in that Blue Jays rotation. I think he would have been a fantastic addition to the Rangers. I mean, providing that kind of a durability. I mean, even when he's had the issues of just getting lit up a little bit in Japan and over stateside, he's still been fairly healthy. I mean, making 29 starts last year in the KBO and throwing over 180 innings by just 2 outs, but still over 180 innings. That's not something that happens a whole lot in Major League Baseball. So adding a guy like that, a number 3 or 4 to your rotation, where if the Rangers had signed him, it would be the rotation of Jacob deGrom, Nathan Eovaldi, Jack Leiter, and then Cody Ponce as your number 4. And then maybe we see a little bit of Jacob Latz as the Rangers number 5. That is a really darn solid rotation. Or maybe it's ends up being Kumar Rocker that fights for that 5th spot in the rotation, but you at least have competition for the 5th spot in your rotation. You have some solidity there. And if the Rangers signed him and also brought back Tyler Mahle, then maybe you have Jacob Latz in the bullpen. Maybe Kumar Rocker isn't even making that opening day rotation, or you at least have some kind of critical redundancy if the Rangers have a little bit of an issue with their pitchers staying healthy in the rotation, which would make sense because Jacob deGrom is going to be 38 next year. Nathan Eovaldi is going to be 36 next year. Like that is a rotation on the older side, and it would make sense if they do have some issues staying healthy. But Cody Ponce, it seemed like such a decent fit. I was about to talk about him on tomorrow's episode, where I'm going to be talking about some of these international free agents. Cody Ponce is not Korean, but he did play for the Korean baseball organization. But there are some guys coming over from Japan, from Korea, who I think could be fits, and who knows if this actually works out for Toronto, but at least gives them some kind of depth in the rotation, some somebody is signed beyond this year. They have a couple of guys who are going to be free agents. Shane Bieber is just signed a 1-year deal, or I guess just exercised his option for 1 year. So he is going to be a free agent at the end of 2026. So it gives Toronto some length in the rotation. They'll have Trey Savage under control for, I believe, 6 more seasons. After this one, they also just signed Dylan Cease to a 7-year deal. So they kind of know what their rotation is going to be. And the Rangers could use that because a couple of guys at the top of their rotation are getting older. We will see them hit free agency, I believe, in both at the same time in 2028, if my math is mathing correctly. And they'll still have Jack Leiter around for a little while, and maybe Kumar Rocker will start to come into his own this year, and we'll see him be more of a viable everyday rotation candidate. But just buying that kind of a depth at that kind of a price, it feels like something that could have been super fitting for the Texas Rangers. But alas, that was not the case. There have been some other deals that have been a little interesting that maybe the Rangers could have at least knocked on the door for. Maybe Ryan Yarbrough at 1 year, $2.5 million. I don't think the Rangers were really in on that. But one that really struck me as interesting is Alek Manoah, a guy who has had just a fascinating career, and not in a good way, coming up with the Toronto Blue Jays and at times being truly elite. But the last 2, 3, has it been 4 years that he's been such an incredible mess, dealing with injuries and ineffectiveness and just the yips. He is bounced around to the Braves last year. I don't think he ended up making the big leagues with the Braves, but after being a guy who finished top 10 in Cy Young voting and had a lot of team control, just kind of fell off a cliff and no one is really particularly sure why. The Angels took a chance on him, signing him to a 1-year, $1.9 million deal. I think that is a fine gamble on fixing Alek Manoah. Maybe the Rangers saw that and thought, actually, no, we're good on not dealing with Alek Manoah, because there is a very good chance that Manoah signs this deal and then does not make any kind of an impact for the Angels, or is at the big league level and is just awful and is just straight up cooked. I mean, he's not old by any means. That's the thing with Alek Manoah. There's still a lot of developmental meat on the bone. I mean, he's turning 28 in January. Like, he is still very young, and he has been incredibly effective. Usually the type of upside you do not get in somebody on the free agent market. So I honestly applaud the Angels. I think they've had a pretty decent offseason. I still think they're not going to be competitive in 2026, but hey, they're at least getting there. And we'll see what this Rangers offseason unfolds. Be back with you tomorrow to talk more about some of these international free agents and if the Rangers should be in on them or not. But that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.